my 154-inch auger just broke. And I have one being manufactured because we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
We knew the problem was coming and we were planning for it, but it broke 10 days before it was ready. You know, because that's Murphy's Law. So I made a phone call to another person that had the keys to close down the same manufacturing design and everything. And I was able to get them to unlock the door, go in, get that auger out of the machine that was idle.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Packaging is always the bottleneck in most manufacturing facilities and is often blamed for slowing production down. But replacing the packaging equipment is never fun, as you need to understand thousands of variables related to machines and impact on your process. The manufacturers might not understand your processes or product, and you might run into a scenario that the packaging machine may not work for your specific needs. And then you might run into contract issues or follow-ups with manufacturers who may not be as prompt as the sale is already made. In today's episode, we have our guest, Christine von Pender, who discusses the procurement process for food packaging equipment. She also discusses the factors you need to understand thoroughly to ensure you acquire the right packaging machine for the right situation. Finally, she shares several supply chain stories around backup strategies that you can employ in case of your equipment or material shortage. Let me introduce Christine to you. Christine is a procurement professional with over 25 years of progressive experience in heavy industrial manufacturing, distribution, logistics, purchasing, and creation and implementation of systems and processes. Her breadth of experience and knowledge is matched with a passion for helping professionals and businesses find the right fit, be it in talent and culture or products and services. Christine is a big picture thinker whose superpower is seeing beyond what is to what could be. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Christine, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. How are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful, and I am super excited to have you in discussing your expertise with food packaging equipment. That is always exciting. Okay, just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus, Christine?
Sure. I'm a 25-year professional supply chain management person, and I've been working with industrial manufacturing, distribution, logistics, purchasing, creation, and implementations of systems and processes. I'm considered a big picture thinker whose superpower is seeing beyond what is to what could be. So I started out, how I got into supply chain was I was in administration for many years, working on systems and processes and mastering software solutions and implementing efficiencies using them. And in 1996, I felt that I had gone as far as I could go in administration. I was kind of hitting my head on the ceiling. And I asked the managers I was working with, what would be a good role for me to level up my career? And it was really great because one of the managers spoke with me about getting my supply chain designation. And I researched the field, and the more I learned, the more excited I became. I started my formal education while being fortunate to have a mentor in that same workplace that worked with me daily and taught me all the actual hands-on side of what it is to be in supply chain and how to navigate it in the real world, while at the same time getting my professional education from PMAC at the time. So fast forward to today with a number of positive reinforcements from pivotal wins and using my superpowers of relationships that I have nurtured along the way to benefit employers and my clients. So I'm very excited to be in this field.
Okay, amazing background there, and I love the way you define your superpowers. I think relationship is going to be the most important superpower, and especially if you are in the supply chain space, that is going to be the most important strength as well. So we are going to be digging deeper into today's topic. But before we do that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth, Christine.
There's business growth and there's personal growth. And when you're a professional in industry, both should be in alignment. And you can never there's always the benefit to having every day be new and fresh. And in supply chain, there are no bad experiences, only learning experiences. You don't know what you're capable of until an emergency happens. And I highly encourage anyone that I mentor to keep a record of your stories and your learnings and your wins, so that on those bad days, you can look back and say, I've got this, and go forward from there. So every day is new and fresh and educational.
Yeah, that's a good way to keeping yourself motivated. And I guess I need to get some trophies here in my room as well, to make sure that I am being motivated on those days when it's going to be rainy. Okay, so yes. So let's talk about today's topic, which is going to be packaging equipment, right? So obviously you have done a lot of work in procuring the packaging equipment. And if I look at this from the layman's perspective, obviously these equipments are going to be fairly complex. You need to consider a lot of different factors. They have some sort of evolution overall in terms of the legacy machines versus the newer machines. They are going to have different capabilities. And obviously the fit is going to be important, because the kind of packaging that you might be doing in your facility at this point of time, you need to make sure that the packaging is able to accomplish that. So tell us, let's say if I were to develop some sort of either RFP or purchasing criteria for the packaging equipment, what am I looking at here?
Oh, well, the biggest thing is to have all of your requirements documented and keep those documents up to date. Okay. You never know when you're going to need to repair or replace a critical piece of equipment. So having that information at your fingertips. The other thing is the maintenance person is going to have a different set of information requirements than the end user of the equipment versus the CFO versus the operations manager. So everyone has different needs around every piece of equipment that's in a facility, right? So it's really, really important that everyone's on the same page and their expectations of outputs are aligned, so that there's no confusion on, getting the right build of the equipment for exactly what you want and need, and that it'll have the ability to grow as you need it to, because a lot of industries right now are leveling up so fast that it's really hard for them to keep up.
Yeah, amazing. So do you have any specific story that you have, let's say if you have had a client engagement where you procured, can you provide some examples of the requirement that you had? What kind of machine was appropriate in that specific engagement? So can you walk us through the story?
Sure. So stick pack filling machine. So the product was, we needed to know the viscosity of the product. We needed to know how many per hour they wanted to produce or have filled and sealed. What is the material of construction are you using flow wrap? Are you, what type of packaging are you using? And what are the requirements for sealing? What are the requirements for, is it by weight? Is it by volume?
Yeah.
And any other, does it need to be cleaned? What type of cleaning are you looking for, depending on the material that you're putting through of your product?
Yeah.
Is it going to be, does it have to be completely taken apart and cleaned individual pieces? Or can it be sprayed down, right, with proper chemicals and things to make sure that everything's food safe and that type of thing? It just varies so much depending on the product. I mean, if you've got a hard product like a chocolate bar, or you've got a liquid product like honey, or a very thick viscous product, not viscous product like honey, or you've got, a number of, so it's like, so chocolate covered almonds would be an example. How are you doing it? By how many almonds are going in the bag, or are you doing it by the weight of the bag, right?
Yeah.
So all of those types of things are just examples of the wide variety of different things that you need to have in play, have an understanding of, and have all of those different people that are touching that machine be in alignment with.
Okay, so is this the first time that you did this, or have you done these projects before? what were some of the surprises in this specific engagement that you found that you just didn't know?
The biggest learning lesson was
Yeah.
making sure that there was setup and service and support, and making sure that when the service and the setup was done, making sure that the people in the business that were going to be touching that machine were fully freed up and available to be with the technician for the whole time that the technician was there setting up the machine with them, so that they could take in those learnings, ask their questions, play with it, and potentially break it so that they could learn how to fix it when the technician is there. And having the business have the ability to free those people up for that time is invaluable.
Okay, interesting. So how many days does it take to complete the setup? Let's say if the technician is going to, how much time are we allocating and how much training is required? If you can talk a little bit about the training aspect of it. What are we learning here? How many different modules? Yeah?
So it's not so much the software. There is software involved. It depends on, sometimes it's Allen Bradley, sometimes it's a different one, depending on the requirements of the business.
Yeah.
But it's Allen Bradley's just the most common. But it from 1 to 3 days is usually a good amount of time to gauge, to allow for in that. And that is to be able to fully take it apart and put it together, take it apart to clean it, take it apart to change, sizing, dimensions, and products being made, or, changing to a different SKU, how much is involved in that. It's a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And if somebody has actually got their hands in the machine and they're doing all of that, that's really going to be the magic that keeps everything running smoothly for a very, very long time.
So basically what you're describing here is changing different packaging configurations. And are these packaging configurations changed by the mechanical tooling, or is it the software tooling that they have? So what exactly are they changing to change different configurations and retooling that?
Sometimes they're changing molds out for different dimensions. Sometimes they're sliding along the measuring devices inside the machine to get your parameters correct. And sometimes it is software that you're changing. So if you're changing a consistency, for example, of a viscosity in a product, then you may have to dial up or dial down in the software to get it to dispense the right amount into the packages before they're sealed.
Okay. So did you do this yourself? Did you have to hire a consultant who is going to be a packaging machine consultant? Because obviously you require a little bit of technical knowledge here. So how did you acquire this technical knowledge?
The technical knowledge and support comes from the equipment manufacturer themselves.
Okay.
So they're in the best position to know every detail, every millimeter of a machine, and be able to look after your needs, but also train your people appropriately. So it's not me myself. I do the assessment and the analysis of what they need, make sure that all of the information is there and all of the detail is there. And then it's taken over by the engineering group that is at the manufacturers.
Okay, so how many different machines and vendors did you evaluate, and what were the factors that you valued for this specific vendor, the machine that you chose? So can you talk about different options that you had and describe in detail what they did not have in comparison to the vendor that you chose?
So the vendor, one example is the customer, the business was thinking that they had to buy a piece of equipment either from Italy or France and have it transport. Oh, and that they had to buy it secondhand because of cost. So they thought they had to buy secondhand because of cost and budget. They thought they had to bring it over from Italy or France to be able to get a high quality machine, and then they would have been at the mercy of whatever they got in the crate when it arrived. And it wouldn't have been set up in place. They didn't have ongoing training. They didn't have training. They didn't have ongoing support with it. And it ended up that we went with a Canadian manufacturer who provided all of the setup support, all of the ongoing training and support. And the Canadian manufacturer had another big plus on their side, which was that any of the wear parts in the machine were available locally. You didn't have to buy it specifically from the manufacturer and wait for their tech to come out from wherever to install it and get your machine back up and running again. Because this particular manufacturer, I'm very, very happy working with them, that they don't believe in holding people ransom for for getting their machines working. So that was a big one there. Those were the big reasons that I worked with this one particular supplier that I was referencing.
Okay, so how many different wear parts do they have? How often are they going to wear? Can you talk about the parts as well, and how much maintenance requirements are going to be there? Let's say as an executive, let's say if I'm installing the machine for the first time and I don't know what to expect. So can you talk about the maintenance aspect over the long term?
Sure. It's going to vary greatly depending on what the equipment is manufacturing or packaging. And the wear parts are going to vary as well, depending on what the product is. So the big thing is to be able to have your people trained in-house wherever possible to deal with any eventuality that can come up with that machine. And you're going to be able to reduce or have zero cost based on the fact that so many of these machines, you're changing SKUs potentially 1 or 2 times a day that you're running on them. So you're having people interact with the machines throughout the day to do those changes. And at that point, you're seeing everything that's going on. So you're seeing where it's wearing, you're seeing where it's needing a change out, you're seeing all of those things and addressing them immediately so that there are potentially almost zero breakdowns and you have almost 100% uptime.
Interesting. And we did one episode related to packaging, and in that there was one comment that this person made, and it was related to packaging always being the bottleneck in the manufacturing line. And they were actually analyzing the entire manufacturing line. And I don't know if this is more of the stigma in the manufacturing community. I have heard a lot of times, but I'm not able to conclude just yet if everybody believes sort of that packaging is always going to be the bottleneck. So in this case, what did you do to ensure that the packaging is not going to be bottleneck for this specific facility? I don't know how many lines you installed this at, but what did you do to make sure that packaging is not going to be a bottleneck?
Making sure that they're using packaging that's easily attainable and easily replicatable so that they're not limited to one source of supply. That's the biggest thing.
Okay, amazing. Do you have any other stories that you might be able to share related to packaging equipment, which was slightly different from this one?
So other types of packaging equipment are, of course, box erectors. And right now, because there's such a demand on labor that box erectors, repetitive stress injuries and things like that are very, very common in that where they need to make boxes and by hand. So having a box erector is a huge help in reducing these injuries, but also due to the fact that there's a serious lack of labor available to do these jobs. Having a box erector takes one whole function out of the mix and helps keep consistent business running.
Okay, amazing. So what are some of the trends that you are seeing right now in the packaging industry? Are there any trends that the executives must be aware of as far as the packaging machines go?
As far as the packaging machines go, rates for steel, most of the equipment is stainless steel.
Yeah.
Because of ease of care and length of life. So right now the price of steel has gone up 10 to 15% since January.
Yeah.
And so the best time would have been to buy your equipment in January, and the second best time is now, because it looks like on the world market the prices are just going to keep going up for the raw material involved in making any of the equipment.
So is the pricing is reflected so fast on the machines, and that is very surprising actually. I don't know if they are going to have the exact correlation. So do you recommend that, let's say, if the executives that they have had machines for a long time and then they are thinking of replacing, should they be looking at the steel price to be able to replace?
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a factor in setting up your budget for what you're going to buy. But the other thing is to remember that for, when you're introducing equipment or upgrading equipment that you already have to new equipment, the advancements and improvements have been significant in the last 10 years. And in the last 5 years, things have gotten faster, cleaner and more contained. So there's less human interaction in dealing with the machines themselves.
So describe an example of how you define the less human involvement. So can you take up a story where you had more human involvement, what the human was doing there in terms of packaging and what they don't have to do now?
Sure. Again, I'm going to use the box erector example. Having an assembly line of 7 people open up the bottom of a box, put it down the line so that the product can get inserted into the box, put the packing material in to make sure that it doesn't get damaged en route, and then having another person putting the shipping label on, putting the tape on the top of the box to close it, and then putting it on the pallet. So there's a lot of, now most of those actions can be fulfilled by equipment.
Okay, but these equipments are going to be fairly expensive, right? And I don't know how reliable they are going to be. So let's say if there are some facilities that are really operating in the manual capacity right now, just because they might not be comfortable, how these machines are going to be and how much maintenance is going to be required. They might not be familiar with the planning for the capacity. And I have heard horror stories where they did not really have the automated equipment, and then finally they started utilizing these equipments. Sometimes the packaging line breaks, and because of that, the whole production is down. It's just a chaos, right? So I don't know how many facilities are going to be comfortable with the machines. And let's say if you are talking to an executive who just is not on board, let's say with these packaging improvements or the packaging line improvements, what is going to be your advice for them, especially when you are planning for these capex spend?
Right. So again, we have a worldwide labor shortage. I was just looking at a report from Pakistan where one company by itself is looking for over 100 workers.
Yeah.
And that was fresh today. So it's not just a one country issue, it's a worldwide issue. So having a backup plan in place so that you don't have to worry about trying to find those workers that are so rare right now, and having a piece of equipment that the return on investment could be anywhere from 10 months to 2 years. And then every year after that, you're saving all of that labor cost and the fuss and bother of having people not turn up for work any given day, which is also happening right now, and making sure that you can have consistent flow of your products through your process and out the door to your customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of easier said than done whenever we talk about any machines or the equipment, right? So yes, I get the argument that, the manpower is a challenge right now. Everybody is struggling to get the manpower. But today I am going to automate everything, and I probably won't need as many people. But typically when we talk to these executives, they are going to have different experiences, especially when you talk about complex piece of machinery. Either you are talking about packaging equipment, or you are talking about any sort of ASRS machines in the warehouse. They sound great on paper, but once you install them, then you are going to have a lot more problems overall from the technical perspective. The technicians that you are going to require, they are going to be slightly more expensive as well. So it's a natural fear for people who have never done this before, right? So have you had similar experiences, or in your experience, the packaging equipment are always going to be reliable? They are never going to run into any issues?
It's interesting that you say that, because my most recent experience with an equipment breakdown or a machine breakdown was in a facility where it was actually user error. Somebody put the wrong product in at the front end of the machine, and it gummed up the whole machine, and the machine was down for 6 hours while they cleaned it all out and had to start again. So it does happen. Of course, there's never 100%. So you plan for those things and you work it in, and you make sure that you have that time built in, and you just get better and better every day as you go along. And every time you have an incident, you go through your debrief after and make sure that you've got it covered, and that particular thing won't happen again.
Yeah, and I completely agree. But depending upon how many times it breaks and if it does what it is supposed to say, so in your experience, the packaging equipments are fairly reliable? What would you say? I mean, see, let's say if I am measuring for the first time, how many times that's going to break up? Is it like once in 6 months? Because see, if my packaging line is going to be stopped, then obviously I don't necessarily have a choice, because now my production line is gone and I cannot ship my goods to the customer. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a huge issue for me unless I have a backup line running or the backup machine running. I don't know if people plan for backup as part of the packaging, but packaging is probably going to be a bottleneck if I don't either have the backup line or the backup machine.
So the other alternative is to have a plan B, and a plan B could be anything from having another machine waiting in the wings to having an agreement with a local company that has the same types of machinery that you need, and making an arrangement with them to maybe run on a night shift at their place while you get your machine fixed. But machine repairs shouldn't take longer than a few hours. So the downtime shouldn't be more than a few hours ever. And if it is, then there's other issues in the supply chain or in the not having the right repair materials and equipment available in the inventory.
Okay, so that's a very interesting supply chain fix right there. So talk to us more about, how this arrangement works. So am I signing this arrangement with my neighbor that, you know what, you have got the same machine, one day you are going to run into the issue? So I understand the barter agreement. Is that the real barter agreement that you are talking about? Or have you seen anything slightly more professional to sign these contracts and agreements to have the backup strategy?
I have yet to sign an actual contract or agreement for that.
Okay.
And it's about being in the same industry as another company and having those relationships with those people so that when you do need something, you can cover for each other, because competition is healthy. And it's about everyone eating, right? My personal philosophy is everybody eats. So anytime there's, something comes across my desk and I know somebody that can help with that issue, that's the person I'm referring for that solution to that person that needs it. So I've had numerous instances where I've called when I was working at pulp mills, I called a different pulp mill and said, my 154-inch auger just broke, and I have one being manufactured because we knew it was coming. Yeah. We knew the problem was coming and we were planning for it, but it broke 10 days before it was ready. Because that's Murphy's Law. So you have to plan for these things. So I made a phone call to another person that had the keys to close down the same manufacturing design and everything. I made that phone call, and I was able to get them to unlock the door, go in, get that auger out of the machine that was idle, put it on a plane for me, and have it delivered so that it could get installed in our machine so that we could get back up and running in as quick a time as possible. And that was $80,000 an hour during that downtime due to that emergency breakage. So that was quite a save there.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that is definitely quite a save. Do you have any more stories related to similar saving? Because I'm really enjoying these stories now.
Good. I have a lot of them. Being around a long time, you get that way. I also was a number of years ago, I was navigating a nickel shortage. There was a world shortage of nickel on the market available for manufacturing into products. And so I was able to find the nickel in one country, had to have it shipped to another country to be smelted into rods. Then I had to send it to a third country to be made into pipes, and then had to get it shipped over. And it was a huge container of them, and had to have it shipped over from Europe to Canada. And when I was having it shipped, during the time it was on the water, the longshoremen went on strike. And when the longshoremen went on strike, that put a halt to everything. So I was able to quickly reach out to the manufacturer that had shipped it to us, got in touch with them, let them know what was happening, made recommendations of a different port to have it land in Canada, and then scrambled to get to know the people on the ground at that port to make sure I could get my container offloaded immediately when it landed and get it put on a truck specifically and exclusively deadhead from their location on the other side of Canada to our location just in time. Still, it was not late for the scheduled maintenance outage. It was very interesting working 24 hours a day because of all the different places in the world and the time zone differences. So that was quite an interesting activity. And again, it was an exciting time for me and my career. And a lot of people still reference that when they talk to me. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a very interesting story. Do you have anything else to cover related to packaging that you wanted to cover but could not cover in this episode?
I think the biggest thing is that pre-pandemic, a number of food manufacturers concerns with their outsourcing their packaging needs, right? Because they're going along and every day was the same and everything was fine. And then the pandemic hit and nobody knew ahead of time what was going to be in demand, and food went crazy. So there's so much volume. They needed to bring their packaging in-house so that they could control what was happening with it a lot tighter, and they would know exactly how much to run and when and how much inventory they needed to have in reserve, and they could run it whenever they needed to. I had one company has gone from 1 shift a day to 3 shifts a day because they were able to get the equipment and have it in place so that they could run 3 shifts a day to supply the customer's needs. So it's a good news, bad news story. The good news is, the bad news, of course, is the pandemic. And the good news is that companies that were able to pivot and level up really quickly, they're benefiting in a great way.
Okay, amazing, Christine. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thought?
Yeah, I was thinking I'm going to put some resources on my website for your listeners to be able to access as jumping off points to get started on creating their own documentation if they don't already have checklists and so on for getting started on their equipment buys. So reach out to ihavepeopleforthat.com and get the resources your business needs to thrive.
Okay, amazing. And my personal takeaway from the conversation is going to be that pay attention to different variables that actually drive your packaging equipment, and you really need to understand them. Otherwise, packaging is probably going to be your bottleneck. On that note, Christine, thank you so much for your time. This has been an insightful episode.
You're amazing, Sam. Thank you for all that you do.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Christine, head over to ihavepeopleforthat.com. It's ihavepeopleforthat.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Mark Uzer from Antares Consulting Group, who discusses how to launch new products by simply changing the packaging. Also the interview with Sarah Skidder from Real Sourcing Network and Roger Buck from Corporate Development Associates, who discusses some exciting trends in the print industry to create a compelling customer experience. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.